Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Cricketer and the Voice podcast, our third one. It gets more and more exciting. My name is RODNEY, HINDS, sports editor at The Voice. I'm actually in the Caribbean right now, which is quite apt, really. Bearing in mind the England West Indies series, I'm joined by the Cricketer's digital editor, Sam MORSHEAD. Greetings,
Hello, RODNEY.
Sam.
Very jealous.
I would say good afternoon, but it's morning. It's morning where I am now, so no worries there. And for the first time, I have been reading his reports, as has the Voice readership. Nick Friend, journalist with the Cricketer, has joined us as well. Welcome, Nick.
Hi, Rodney. Thanks very much. I'm very jealous of you as well.
Yeah. I've got the fan with me though, guys, because it's quite warm. It's quite warm. It's authentic. It really, really is authentic. Guys, listen, there's only one place for me to start, isn't there? 113 run success for England. I know there were 22 players taking part, but there was only really one, wasn't there? That was the man, and we talked about him last week, didn't we, Sam? In terms of the irrepressible Ben Stokes. Sam, what can you say about him? I'll leave it to you. The next half an hour could all be about him if we really wanted it to be.
It could be, because most of that game was about him, wasn't it? What a player. So Joe Root called him Mr. Incredible, didn't he, afterwards? Told everyone that we're now in the presence of greatness, giving the journalists a couple of fantastic lines on the end of a test match. He has the ability to change gears. It's just remarkable ability to do it. If you look at the difference between his two innings, he made his slowest test century of his 10 in that partnership with Dom Sibley that laid the foundation. And then he hit the fastest ever 50 by an England opener in the second innings. He bowled 2 11-over spells as well, took a good catch, and was everywhere in the field, including off his own bowling when he ran the whole way to the long off boundary to field off his own bowling. He's irrepressible at the moment, isn't he? He's now the number 1 all-rounder in the world in Test cricket, according to the ICC rankings, but he's also the number 3 batsman in Test cricket, behind only Kohli and Steve Smith. He's averaging almost 60 over the course of his last 13 tests over the last year with the bat. And during this current series, he's averaging 17 with the ball as well. He's a freak. What an incredible performance. And I don't think we're ever going to get bored of watching him. Even West Indies fans couldn't get bored of watching that guy play cricket at the moment.
I mean, the only tribute I can really pay to him, apart from what you've just said, is that he plays cricket the way that some of those great West Indians used to in the past. Do you know what I mean? Whether it be a Clive Lloyd, etc., etc. Nick, all of this in terms of Ben Stokes after his high-profile court case, I want to use the word maturity now being added to his game. I mean, he's still a relatively young man, but he seems to have grown after the last few years. What say you?
Yeah, I mean, first it's sort of just what Sam said, really. I mean, I think what's become so noticeable, certainly in the last 12 months, and I guess it's been going on through the World Cup as well as just that final, but there was a time when sort of we associated like the great all-rounders with these almost sort of fits and spurts kind of players. You know, Andrew Flintoff in that 05 Ashes series, he was sort of everywhere, but then I guess that didn't so much come out of the blue, but he wasn't the all-encompassing player that Stokes has become, you know, either before then or truly afterwards. And I think a lot of the great all-rounders have these moments when they're sort of in the action and they seem to be everywhere, but then they go through those quiet spells as well. But what Stokes seems to have mastered, which seems so unique and so rare, is to be everywhere with the bat and everywhere with the ball at the same time. I mean, one of the things that a lot of all-rounders speak about is, I guess, how great a role it is, because if you do fail with the bat, then you can go and do it with the ball. Whereas what Stokes has got going on at the moment is making 170 with the bat and then being fit enough to run himself into the ground with the ball. And yeah, I mean, as you say, it's that maturity as well. I mean, like, there was an element in the first test where you sort of thought that he missed an opportunity. I mean, he made 240 odds. I think he was England's top scorer in the first innings, and they made 45 the second innings as well. And on both occasions, you sort of felt that had he wanted to, had he really properly knuckled down, he could have gone further. And to go from that and sort of put that into practice in the next game and record his slowest 100. I mean, I was in the press conference after his 100 on the second day, and he said that, yes, he was delighted about the 100, but actually more than the 100 itself, it was that Ben Stokes managed to face 300 balls. He said, not something he could envisage himself doing. So, like, I think it's that maturity more than anything. The fact that he's almost, I can't remember who said it, but someone said it yesterday, that it's as if he now understands the entire game, every format, every situation, every moment within the game. He's got an answer to, which I guess a lot of the great all-rounders of the past and the good all-rounders of the past, and even him up to a couple of years ago, probably didn't have to the degree that he's showing at the moment.
I think what really excites me, guys, is the fact that he's mentioned in the same breath as Flintoff and Botham. And at the tender age that he's at, he still has the ability, Sam, to be better than both of them. That's an exciting prospect, isn't it?
I think he's already better than both of them with the bat. I think that's the argument with that now. The issue with particularly getting past Botham is that he's never going to be the same as Botham with the ball. He's used in a very different way as Botham was used with the ball. And it would be good for England not to allow him to bowl as many overs as Botham would have bowled. So it's hard to have direct comparisons in that sense, but in terms of being the standout guy on the England team, the world-class performer who can change matches, then yeah, absolutely, you have to compare him. But comparing them directly in terms of the players that they are, whilst it might be, it's easy because they're all-rounders, they're very different kinds of all-rounders. So that comparison's a bit tougher.
Yeah.
I think what Stokes has almost done to point is redefined what we in England see as an all-rounder. If you know what I mean. I think he passed Flintoff as a batsman very, very early. And I actually think when you watch Flintoff back now, in the knowledge of what you know through Stokes, I personally would look at Flintoff now. And I know he got Test hundreds and he's got 160 odd, and obviously that great series in 05. When I watch Flintoff now, he looks to me like a great bowler who batted. And to be honest, and to an extent, Stokes, if you look at the great English seamers, for me, Stokes is still very much a batsman who bowls. I think, yeah, as Sam says, I don't think his bowling will ever get that close to both of them, but I don't think that is, in a way, I don't think that particularly matters. And not only because of his runs, but also, so I think the kind of cricketer is, he's so all-encompassing, and it's that horrible cliche that he makes things happen, isn't it? They say about Sam Curran the entire time, but it was Stokes yesterday when England desperately needed a wicket just before tea, when Blackwood and Brooks put together that partnership. It was Stokes who broke that partnership. It was Stokes in Cape Town in January. And what's so amazing with Stokes actually is that this year especially is we've spent the whole year saying there's hardly been any cricket. There's hardly been anything. The game stopped in March, and yet we're 7 months into the year, and he's got a Test match time in Port Elizabeth. He's won England a game in Cape Town. He's captained England for the first time in the first Test here. He's got 170 on the first innings in Manchester. He's got 70 odd or 50 balls in the second innings. He's done what he's done in the field after that. We thought he'd gone off the field and broken himself on day 4, and it turns out he had indigestion. He's back on the field bowling again. And then come yesterday evening, we think he's broken again, and we just get told he's shattered. And like in a way, that was quite nice. Just like that reminder that, and frankly, that is quite an important reminder, I think, to English cricket, that they can't afford to break him. They've got a really good thing.
Totally agree.
And England have done this in the, Flintoff by his own admission would say that he almost broke himself when he took over as captain. And like, if there's in a funny kind of way, if there was ever an argument for Stokes not to captain this England team on a full-time basis, it would almost be these last couple of weeks. Because yes, he had a go. He didn't do anything wrong, I don't think, once the game started in Southampton. We can talk about his team selections and the toss and whatever, but you look more at this game and think, God, like, he put this much into that game, without having the choice of when he was going to bowl himself and stuff. But imagine being sort of the adrenaline that he had rushing through the last 5 days, and then him go, right, I'm going to do it, and forget the 11 over spells. You might be looking at 15 overs, and that's when don't break him. You've got a really good thing, and you already feel like he's pushing the edges of what he should be doing. I don't think he should have chased that ball to the long off boundary yesterday. Like, for example, they'd run 4 by the time he got there anyway. Like, it's brilliant to see, and it's a great. That's where he's so different. He is Jack Callis was a brilliant cricketer, but Stokes is a different kind of all-rounder, that he's so all-encompassing. It's almost the figure as much as the runs and the wickets and the catches. It's what he adds as a presence.
Yeah, an absolutely special cricketer. So all of that, and he didn't do it single-handedly, meant that England have levelled the series with that 113 win success in 4 days. I think that's absolutely special, bearing in mind that Saturday was wiped out. And adding to the game from England's point of view, I want to talk about Dom Sibley and Stuart Broad. Now, Sibley's century, 120 in that first innings, was as important, clearly, Sam, as Stokes' effort as well. What tribute could you pay to Dom Sibley?
Well, I think that England have found, not just with him, but with Rory Burns as well, they've shown that county cricket can produce batsmen that can cut it at the top of the Test order, playing the way in which they played in county cricket. It's a very different way that Chris Silverwood has set out his lineup than Trevor Bayliss did. Not quite as much on total and scoring rates. A lot more on consolidation and foundation laying. And Sibley's that kind of guy that will do that. And he's also being given the freedom, although it seems such a strange word, the freedom to not do anything. It has worked for him. It's got two guys with quirky techniques who look like they shouldn't belong anywhere near an England top order, but they settled in because they've got the mental capacity to do it, and they've got the resolve to do it, and the grittiness. And so that's what he's all about. Mikey Holding was sort of going on before Sibley got out, holding out in the deep in that session when England were looking to accelerate, and he was saying, well, why doesn't he another gear to him? He needs to learn how to go faster. I don't think Dom Sibley needs to learn how to go faster in a Test match. If he's got batsmen in his lower and middle order, like Stokes, like Pope, like Butler, like Wokes, like Curran, who can do it themselves, if he's going to sit there and bat and face 350 balls and get 100, and England can be in a position like 200 for 3, then they're not going to need him to accelerate too much, unless in quite remarkable circumstances. So, yeah, he's got everything that England seem to need in these circumstances at the moment. Having said that, he'll probably go and bag himself a pair. But yeah, he was terrific. My second favourite part after various Stokes heroics, though, was when he started to get on a little bit of a jog towards the England changing room on the 4th evening. When he was, he was thinking, oh, I'm going to have a bat now. And he was obviously told by Root very clearly, no, slow down, no. You're not batting. Right? And you can suddenly see his face a little bit and it slowed down. And it's great that he wanted to go out in those circumstances as well. And he would have known that England would have been looking for fast runs and he was still looking to go himself. So I think that he comes under some unnecessary stick when we've been complaining for years about having some people at the top of the order who can be there for a while. First it was supporting Cook, now it's in place of Cook, and it seems like maybe there are two. So let's give them a little bit of extra leeway before we criticise at the moment. Absolutely.
No criticism, Nick, at all with the returning Stuart Broad. Point to prove and point proven, would you say?
Yeah, I just thought it was... It felt so inevitable, didn't it? It was like, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't for a second say that England, pulled a blinder by dropping him at the Ageas, because, I think Stuart Broad would be the first bowler on my team sheet for an England game for the last 2 or 3 years. I don't think there's a circumstance when you would drop him. But that said, from Broad's perspective, it's a massive credit to him that, having spoken pretty openly before the series started about how he would need to sort of learn, for someone that's sort of ridden so much off the crowd for so many years and the buzz and the intensity of it all, for him to, I guess, create that own buzz for himself and that own sort of added driving force for himself on the back of, not so much on the back of being dropped, I think more on the back of his interview. I mean, the interview he did with Sky Sports was, I think, pretty significant on a lot of levels, but actually for him personally, it meant that he went in sort of with the pressure of his own words to back up. And I don't think it was ever in much doubt that he was going to. I mean, it's just what he does. And certainly with some of the technical flaws of some of the West Indian batsmen, notably guys like Blackwood and Brathwaite who sort of camp on the back foot, for someone like Broad, who is, in the last couple of years, I think he's got something like 43 LBWs and bowls out of 93 Test wickets. Like someone who angles the ball in, basically looks to hit the stumps. I think it was always likely that was going to happen. And also I think he thrives when he's the main man. And obviously there was never any Jimmy Anderson in that Test because he was rested. And then once Archer was missing as well, that then I guess that really sort of played into his hands in a sense. And I mean, not to discount Chris Wokes, who I actually thought bowled better than Broad, but did what Wokes does and went about it maybe with less fanfare and noise than Broad did. But them as a pair, and obviously with the angle and slight difference of Sam Curran and I guess and what Stokes offs as well. I mean, it sort of turned itself into a very good attack out of what could have been a pretty chaotic few days. And I mean, he's got 491 Test wickets. I mean, I said to someone yesterday, I mean, there's not another bowler in that list, if you look at the guys who've got 500, 450 odd, who would ever be left out of their team. You've got 490 Test wickets. It's just a complete given. Like the idea that there are some people out there that still think he has to prove himself because he is this sort of adrenaline bowler is mental. Like you don't take 490 wickets off adrenaline alone. Like it's what is it now? 13 years of utter skill. And imagine Sri Lanka leaving Murali out because they had another Test match 3 days later. It's completely insane. And he made a very valid point when he talked about his age in comparison to Anderson's. He's 4 years younger. Anderson's taken 140 wickets in the time since he turned Broad's age. Like we've got given what we know of Broad, like the kind of character he is, you can have every suspicion that he will get very close to whatever Anderson finishes on. Because like he'll keep on coming back.
So I mean, without doubt, they're listening to what you guys have to say. That second Test belonged to England without doubt. The key performers all the way through. We're now going to just look at Phil Simmons' view, the West Indies coach. Nick, he sort of like voiced his disappointment that none of his batsmen can get to a century. And I think I was having some WhatsApp dialogue with you, Sam, in the first Test where I said something to the fact that they failed to ram home the advantage. 60s and 50s are fine, etc. But to win Test matches, Stokes, and back through the day or day and a half so everybody else can build, that, for me, first Test, second Test, as well, Sam, is proving to be a problem for the West Indies, no?
It is proving to be a bit of a problem, yeah. It's been a problem for England in the past too. It's I think most sides will have had it at times. There's a lot of talent in that West Indies top order. There's a lot of ability. There's some fantastic techniques as well. And there are some batsmen coming through behind them that could fill in and give them a go potentially in the third Test. You do need someone to come make it, don't you? And that's what Jermaine Blackwood showed in the second innings at Hampton. Someone goes on and makes a score, then you win a game in that situation when it's not particularly high scoring. When you concede nearly 500 runs, you know you're going to have someone who makes a century. Otherwise, you're going to be perilously close to following on, and you're not going to be in the game. I think there's some proper questions to be asked about Shai Hope pretty soon. He's probably most at-risk batsman in that team behind John Campbell, who has to be the third Test. You just can't keep going with him, can't keep persisting. But there is a real issue with Hope, who's unbelievably talented, and his white ball statistics show that he can make runs regularly, but it's just not happening in Test cricket. And then West Indies have to decide what they're going to do to sort of solidify that top order. That said, Ross and Chase is averaging 35 in this series. Blackwood's averaging over 40 in the series. Shamar Brooks is averaging over 40 in the series. So there's plenty of positives, but they just haven't had the equivalent of Stokes, who's gone on and made a big one. And Brathwaite, who's had his starts, hasn't been able to do a Sibley and stay in long enough to support the middle order. So those are the biggest differences between the batting units in the second Test. But in the first Test, we saw that they had plenty enough to beat England when their bowlers fired early on and reduced England to a low score. So that it's really fine margins in this Test series, which it actually shows how closely matched the two sides are. So whilst there is Campbell and Hope will surely be looking over their shoulders and worrying for their places. I still think there's plenty for Simmons to be quietly pleased about, even if not ecstatic.
Yeah.
I also think there's on that as well. I think there's England's seen it for years. It's not easy when you're 30 for 3. Scoring 100 in the middle order, I think, becomes much easier when you've got a platform. Is what I'm trying to say there. I think, and if you do keep on coming in at 30 for 3, as certainly in the 2 fourth innings chases that we've seen, it is hard. You do feel like you've done a lot of the, God, even speaking from a club cricket perspective, you feel like you've done a lot of work when you get yourself to 60 or 50, and especially when you've gone in sort of fighting fires. And Brooks looks I could watch him for days. He's clearly hugely talented, and also clearly one that England haven't quite worked out how to get out yet. I think Campbell's problem is less the lack of runs. It's that England have clearly got a very obvious plan that he can't seem to sort of overcome at the moment. Technically he's not disastrous by any stretch, but he just can't resist. England are going full at him, and he can't resist a drive when it's wide, and when it's straight, he's playing around it. But Brathwaite, Broad spoke with a lot of respect for him on the fourth day, saying that he was the one that England needed if they were going to win this Test, to get him in the first 10 overs. Hope, as Sam said, is just Hope's, to be fair to Hope, his biggest issue is almost the sort of the tag of Headingley that hangs over him on the outside, because actually it's people that have been watching West Indies cricket consistently for a while, and not just 3 years ago when he was last here. They'll tell you that this is sort of the norm, not what a lot of spectators in England have expected for him based on, I guess, the tour a couple of years ago. That middle order is huge. I still think Holder's batting too low. He's got a double 100 against his team. He's the until about 3 hours ago was the world's top ranked all rounder. He's a fine batsman. I'd certainly have him above Dowrich, because
certainly when you're coming up against pace, with Wood and Archer presumably set to come back if they're going to keep rotating. I don't know if they will or not, but if they do, then Dowrich does not look comfortable against around 90.
He's clearly a far better player than he was when he was last over here, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's that he's come back and he's going to be as comfortable as he is in other parts of the world. I'd certainly have him in the side, but I'd certainly have Holder batting at 7 above him. Dowrich was out identical fashions in the 2 innings, just sort of hopping back and across to balls that sort of looked like they were missing, because it was such an unusual position to find himself in. But actually, he's jumping so far across that it's been quite easy to give him out, because he's showing a lot of leg stump. But equally, there is a chance not to play him if they really feel that way, because they've got Joshua Da Silva, who got runs in the warm-up game, who is more of a top-order batting option than he is. I wouldn't move Dowrich. I think he's a far better cricketer than a pair at Old Trafford would suggest. And I also don't. You don't want to make too many changes to a team that I guess was. That Test was defined by Stokes, wasn't it? Sibley's knock was very important. But if you take, it sounds silly to say take 170 runs out of it, but if you take the only bloke in the middle order of either side to really go on and make a convincing score in this series, you've still got a pretty even sort of level playing field. So there shouldn't be too much doom and gloom. They're playing a lot of very good cricket, and poor old Shannon Gabriel looked to spent force on day 4, but his attitude shows what they've been all about. He never stops running in. He looks like he's running across hot coals, but he's he keeps on coming in. His pace was never really down, and that's been, I think, the best of them in a sense, that they've been massively sort of wholehearted in everything, even if there have been struggles with 1 or 2 of the batters.
Okay, let's look ahead to the third and final and deciding Test back at Manchester on Friday then. So much of sport is about momentum. My personal viewpoint is that being bowled out on the final day has given that momentum shift totally to England right now. And it's now a case of whether England will be good enough to see that through. I was watching a local cricket programme here in Barbados, and they were suggesting I was watching that last night. They were suggesting that Shai Hope should stay in the team, but he should bat at number 6 for this third and final Test match. What do you guys reckon of that?
What's the logic behind that?
I don't know if it was logic, Sam. I think it might be more emotion.
I think the risk of batting someone at 6 is that if
Yeah.
actually if your top 5 does its job, your number 6 comes in and faces the second new ball. And Hope's problem really has been against the first new ball. So I just feel for him a bit because he's clearly a very good player in certainly in ODI cricket, and he's clearly shown in the past he has the game at Test level. And there just comes a point when you're better off being taken out the firing line. And
I would agree with you.
This feels the problem with Hope, and I do get why they'd say that, because you watch him and when he's not, this sounds ridiculous, this sounds completely ridiculous, but when he's not being cleaned up, there's a player there. Like you can tell it, and if you knew nothing, but if you knew nothing of his history and you just watched him driving Don Best through extra cover yesterday and the way he sets up in defence, you would think here's the guy that's got about a 3 for us. Like I completely get the logic. But he's, for whatever reason, he's not pushed on from where we thought he would be. Mikey Holding said it yesterday on commentary that when he saw him play at Headingley and get those 200s, not even just at Headingley, he got runs at Lords in the Test afterwards. When he saw him on that tour, he said he thought he'd come back on this tour now averaging 45-50 in Test cricket, and for whatever reason, he's averaged 19 in his last 19 games. He's passed 53 times since Headingley. He doesn't play much first-class cricket, or hasn't played much first-class cricket for a long while. I don't think they'll stick with him, just based on the way that Simmons spoke last night, talking specifically about how they were going to have to sit down, how his form was a concern. But also what's odd about his white ball cricket is that he's not a dasher with in white ball cricket. He's still that sort of that. When Jonathan Trott averaged 50 off for England in ODI cricket, like they're not playing dissimilar roles. Hope's not going out there and whacking it. He's still the glue. So it's a more proactive version of what you want at Test level, but he's not changing his game a la Johnny Bairstow, for example, whose game with the white ball is completely different, which is why it's so baffling. I mean, I don't know. It's bizarre, isn't it?
Moving ball, Nick. It's a moving ball.
Yeah. It is. But it was a moving ball. It was a moving ball 3 years ago, and before then, and the West Indies used the Dukes back in the Caribbean as well. So you'd think he'd be as well placed as any visiting number 3, to counter it, and which I imagine may well be one of the reasons why he was kept in at the start of this tour, because coming back to good memories, conditions that he sort of knows.
Well, he grew up with them. Like he was at school here. Like
absolutely. But this is what I mean. It does make no sense.
Guys, I'm going to say this: there's no hope for the West Indies come Friday.
Right? They're losing hopes. There were two hopes when they were over in 2017. Kyle's gone. Shai's about to go.
No hope.
I don't think that they can justify dropping Hope and not dropping Campbell. I think that you have to drop both at the same time, and then it's whether they think they're bringing Mosley and De Silva in at once is going to be when it works.
Where they are in a good spot with Mosley and De Silva is that both got runs in warm-up games. So I mean, granted, the second one Mosley didn't. He got 6 and 0 in the second one, but he got an 80 odd and 40 odd in the first game. Obviously, De Silva got his ton in the second one. So at the very least, they're coming, and also proper warm-up games. Not County 2 stuff. Gabriel, Roach, Holder, Joseph, Kemar, Holder, like proper attack. So they're going to come in, and they'll have seen how well the bowlers have gone, and know, hopefully in their own minds, that those are proper runs they made. So if they do come in, and whichever of them do, and if Bonner comes in as well, I mean, they'll know that that they've got the game to do it, which I guess is half the job. And of course, in both cases, they got their runs at Old Trafford as well, because that's where they played their warm-up games. So they've played out there. They know the conditions. They know they've got them against good bowlers, and frankly, they know they can't do much worse than what they'd be replacing.
Sam, do you expect to see Jofra Archer back, guys, in England setup?
Well, I mean, he's available. He's
available. But do you pick him, bearing in mind what happened? And what did you make of that incident when you heard about it? Tell me, guys, what did you make of it, Sam?
Well, he was being very daft, and I don't think that he could possibly have fully comprehended the possible extent of the consequences when he popped home for an hour. I don't think that he would have thought about it, and I'm sure that he was not alone. That lots of people probably wouldn't have thought about it. And he had been in one place for 3 weeks, and I can understand why you would go popping home might not feel like you're causing a lot of issues. But when Ashley Giles said it could have cost tens of millions of pounds, it wasn't any kind of hollow reference. These matches are worth around about £20 million a pop in terms of broadcast contract value. So if the series had been cancelled and then the Pakistan series subsequently had then been put into question, that's £100 million. So there was a fair comment, and England have supported him at the same time. So I think the ECB have done really well with the whole situation. But what do I think about it? It was a daft mistake, and I think that he's obviously showed his contrition, and it makes sense that he's now available for selection. The problem that he has given himself is that Stuart Broad and Chris Woakes both bowled so well, and Anderson is obviously going to come back into this team. So is he going to get the nod now? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know whether there would have been a pre-plan either for who was going to be rotated. Obviously, he wasn't meant to miss the second test. So would England stick with their pre-planned rotation, and would that mean that he's out of this one as well? Lots of question marks, and he hasn't helped himself, even though it seems like his indiscretion has largely left England unaffected, thankfully, or series unaffected. But I'm not one of these who wants to jump on the back of him and say that it was an act of willful sabotage or anything like that, which I've seen some commentators pop up with on social media. That just seems a little bit extreme. It was really daft. He can't possibly have understood the potential consequences, and he's out of everything in the end. He's probably done himself the biggest harm in terms of selection for the next game and then going forwards.
Nick, do you expect to see him back?
I've spent ages trying to work this out this morning. On the basis that, I don't think he'd have played this one if he hadn't broken the protocol, because I think he'd have played the second one, and I don't think they want anyone to play 3 in a row, especially the Pakistan series coming up. So, for what it's worth, I actually think it makes more sense for him to play this one than for Anderson to, because the position they got themselves into at the beginning of the series was, in my opinion, not a terribly clever one, with Wood and Archer playing together, meaning that you would then essentially rotate. If you wanted to keep your rotation going, you were then effectively rotating the 2 quick lads in and out at the same time and breaking up Anderson, Broad and Woakes. And Woakes is your best bowler in English conditions. Anderson's the best seamer of all time, and Broad is Broad. So, and then you've got Curran to fit in. I would have picked Ollie Robinson in the second test. Now that he didn't play in the second test, I sort of feel sorry for him, because I can't possibly see how he gets back in now. But I think I would now play Archer. I think I would. I don't think I'd play Anderson, because you've then got, I think Woakes and Broad have to play because they were so good, which then means that when you come to the first test of the Pakistan series, you can then rotate bring Anderson in for one of Broad or Woakes, which actually does make for a slightly more natural rotation system than what they had set themselves up for with the lunacy that they went with at the Ageas Bowl. So, one way or another, I feel like they might have, if that makes sense, I think they might have stumbled across something. I would certainly play Bess. I think any talk for not playing a spinner is, I know the forecast isn't fantastic, but we got that was only a 4-day game that we've just seen. It was turning pretty square on day one, and you've only got to look at Holder's dismissal on the final day to see what. Bess didn't bowl that well. I think he'd probably admit that, but when he bowled his best ball, which he bowled to Holder and which he bowled to Shai Hope when he just come in on the bounce over the top, when he bowled that best ball, right pace, right spot, it was doing all sorts, and I would certainly pick him. And also, he's a 22-year-old. He's a 22-year-old off spinner, so back him. It's completely. He took 5 wickets in South Africa a few months ago. If you want him, if he's your guy, he's your guy. If he's not, then pick Jack Leach. But then you should have picked Jack Leach, a month ago. So, I think I don't know. I think I'd pick Archer. I wouldn't pick Wood. I think Wood's success for England so far in Test cricket has come on really quick wickets. And what we've seen in the series has been 3 quite slow wickets. And actually Wood banging it in short of a length, hoping he's going to hurry batsman, isn't really doing anything. I mean, like I play club cricket, and my view is there is a level at club cricket at which just being quick, becomes less effective, and it's probably like second level. and obviously Mark Wood is a million times better than that. But if it's a slow deck if it's a slow deck in the sense, and if you don't have that sort of searing Yorker that Stark has on sort of on speed dial, so to speak, I mean, then you sort of worry that you're going to waste a lot of Mark Wood's sort of trying to batter down quite slow, sad pitches, when actually they've got bigger fish to fry with him coming up away from home on pitches that will be more suited to him. So I certainly wouldn't look to overuse Wood. I would still look to pick Robinson at some point in the next couple of months, because he would have caused carnage on the 2 surfaces that they played on so far. I think I'd go Broad, Archer, Wokes, Bess, hope Stokes is fit, and if not, just sort something out.
Rodney, before we, I'm sure you're going to want to wrap it up quite soon, but before you do, I wanted just to ask you what the vibe's been like out in Barbados about this series, and whether there's any interest in it, or how much interest there is in it compared to any ordinary series, or whether you've noticed any particular talk or anything like that.
I think the talk is, I think success and winning always helps, doesn't it? And obviously, we talked about it earlier. I think West Indies were in a position not to lose the second test. I really believe that. Yeah. And the vibe I was getting from the locals was, here we go again. Because sport is, especially Test cricket, is not always about winning. And the Wisden Trophy would have been retained, wouldn't it, with that draw? So there was massive disappointment. Radios and TVs were being turned off as the wickets were going down, because to add to that, it was a 4-day test match. Saturday was almost wiped out. So Phil Simmons's point about disappointment with batsmen not seeing 50s turn into big centuries, it's all there. And I think if the West Indies, and they may well still go on, even though I personally don't think they will, I think they may go on, they could still go on to retain the trophy or win it outright. I think there was an opportunity missed. And I think I saw some behaviour in the first test, which I saw in the second, which alarmed me. 50s and 60s do not win you test matches. Jason Holder is a fantastic player, but he's no Ben Stokes, in my opinion, in terms of, at the moment, just turning things around on his own. So I think the vibe is disappointment. But as I said, success normally turns that around quite quickly. So if there is success in Manchester, I think the vibe on the road and on the streets will be positive. And, listen, it's not all doom and gloom. I think that's what you said, Sam. Because bearing in mind the conditions that they're playing in, the fact that they have, if you like, put their health at risk, travelling all those miles, they should be supremely credited for what they do. But then on the field of play, you want to be able to say, here's that trophy again. And at the moment, I think the momentum is with England. It's certainly with Ben Stokes, who seems like he can do things single-handedly at the moment. And just to give you a little bit of news of what I did pick up, that Sir Everton Weekes' funeral will take place on July the 30th. And as at the Kensington Oval, that mecca of Bajan cricket, if not world cricket. And as I understand it, Jason Holder, West Indies captain, will be a pallbearer on the day. So, as soon as this test match is over, Jason's got some other important work to do. So how do you see it, guys? Third and final test. Call it for me. I can see the smiles on your faces throughout this 30 minutes or so. You got a fancy England, haven't you?
I think you do if they can get a game in. The forecast is not brilliant for the next few days. I think,
but they can win test matches in 4 days, Sam.
They might need to win it in between 3 and 3.5, looking at the forecast for Old Trafford at the moment. But these things change. I think that if England have got an attack that has Broad, Anderson and Wokes in, as I suggest it probably will, then overcast conditions at Trafford with those three and a West Indies lineup that's not scoring many runs beyond 60s, 70s. I just think there isn't quite, still, as we discussed on the first podcast of this series, there's just not quite enough runs there. And that, I think that's going to be the decider. I don't think it'll be quite as vast, the gap in the next game, because you can't imagine. I mean, I know Stokes is extraordinary, but you can't do it twice in a row, surely. So I don't think there'll be quite as big a gap, but I think England will win or the Wisden Trophy.
Yeah, Nick, how do you see it? Final test.
Yeah, likewise. I just think I worry about West Indies going in with the same bowling attack, if only because of sort of fitness. I mean, certainly not quality-wise. I think they've been brilliant. I mean, the one change I would make to the bowling attack, I'd pick Cornwall if the forecast changes. If it looks like it's going to be a 3-day test or whatever, then I obviously wouldn't. But if they think they're going to get some proper meaningful cricket, certainly given the way that England played Chase and good God, if they're playing Chase like that, I'd love to see Cornwall bowl at someone, because Cornwall is such a good bowler, and not that Chase isn't. I mean, he's got a very strange way of picking up wickets against England. So despite not really doing it against anyone else, but that said, really, really good all-round cricketer, and he is, well, to be fair, he's one who you'd look at and think he could go and get a proper, match-changing 100. I think he did it in what is now known as the Shannon Gabriel, why do you do that test? I mean, that was Chase at the other end on 100 and something now, wasn't it? So he certainly got the game and the sort of stoicism for it. I mean, I can't see them losing, as you said. I think just the momentum of playing the same ground as well, bring someone back in who's got a stand named after him at the place. And also, even if those, despite what I said about those guys who might come in the top of the order, they're ultimately you're probably coming in cold. Those runs for Josh Da Silva probably feel, they will probably feel that 2 or 3 weeks ago they were. So I think England would rather bowl at someone coming in for their test debut, as Mosley would be, or Da Silva, than going in at someone like John Campbell, who actually, has always historically been very good for a cameo of, quite a sort of quick 5:30 kind of thing. I can there would certainly be logic to keeping them going and hoping they can do what they can do. But no, I can't see them losing after, given how well their sort of whole stock of seamers is bowling, and knowing they've got some kind of assurance at the top of the order as well. So toss will be big if it is overcast and everything. England have shown in this series that they are very capable of being rolled very quickly. So as of West Indies, so a lot on the toss, and then a lot on, I guess, the fitness of bowlers if we are going to get a shortened game.
Yeah,
That's
guys, it's been a great series so far, and I think that the third and final Test match, as long as it's not interrupted by that Manchester weather, could just add another really interesting story. West Indies do have a chance, I'm sure they do, but I think the momentum is with England. But listen, I'm a sports journalist. I've got many of these predictions wrong in the past, and not cricket. Listen, guys, thanks for joining me. I'm 4,000 miles away, but it's nice and warm. It's real cricket weather over here. Sam, thanks a lot. Nick, thanks for your time. That brings a conclusion to the Cricketer and the Voice podcast, part 3. No doubt when we all get together, we'll do a nice little review, won't we? And see who has the Wisden Trophy in their hands.